Alrighty, what's going on, guys? Shaw here, and today school is in session. We are going to be doing a coaching session. Our good friend Jaetriel has requested for me to look over his Halls 21 to see if I can offer any type of insight. I had to put on my best tie for this. Like, super cringy, man. So my goal with this is to go through and look at everything from things like with rotation to just generalized talent, stats, the way the dungeon's being pulled, how pulls are being optimized around cooldowns. I'll point out any kind of UI elements. Obviously, the UI is very subjective to the player, and they should be using whatever is comfortable for them. But I do think that there are some aspects that a tank player or just a player in general needs to have in High Mythic Plus, or sometimes things are overkill. So I'm going to go over all of that in this video. So one big thing that I noticed when I was watching this through the first couple times is that the hardest thing to see in this video was more of a rotation tracker, mainly because there's no GCD tracker or plugin that's tracking that kind of stuff. There are options and details to do that. So in the future, when I'm doing this, it's really nice to be able to see that, because then I can be like, I can point out like, hey, you're not optimizing this thing enough, or you're clicking this button too often. Those type of things are really hard to see when I can't see that kind of dialogue being expressed in a plugin in game. So again, Jaetriel, thanks for sending this to me. I'm sorry it took so long to kind of sit down and analyze, but I've been pretty busy the last week or so. So we're gonna just dive in. So starting off, we're seeing a breakdown of his stat weights. Stat weights look fine. Identifying some of the gear, it looks like you have a few items, actually one item with haste. You have a neck with mastery here. You're definitely, hopefully by now, replaced this. I don't remember what the belt stat weights give, but most of this gear is going to be the crit verse. Of course, the tier is set stat, so you can't really control that. So the crit looks very good. The verses could be a little higher, but it's not a big deal. The haste would be a little low for my liking, but again, with the high tolerance talent, you're going to be fine there. Your mastery seems a little high, but I think that is coming from your necklace mostly, as well as the helm, if I'm not mistaken. But outside of that, I think your stat weights look good. Obviously, there's some improvements you can make on like boots and on neck, but that just comes with time. Oh, and your belt. I think that's Dealer's Iax's cloak, if I'm not mistaken. So that's why your mastery is going to be a little high. You want to lower that as much as you can, and you can replace that with crit and verse. And then I would argue haste. I just like having a higher base haste, because on bosses it makes the rotation seem a little bit more fluid. Outside of that, I think we're good here though. So let's jump into the actual video now. One thing I did notice is you were running the special delivery talent compared to Rushing Jade Wind. So one thing we can do is, I of course do this all the time, is we can actually go over to our good friends over here at Subcreation. So on Subcreation, we can take a look at Brewmasters, very strong tank currently, and we can see that the top two runs, 30 and 31, are making up roughly 75% of the runs are running these two builds. So the biggest thing that's going to change is going to be the difference between Rushing Jade Wind and Special Delivery. There are arguments to be made for both. One is going to be a little bit more increased passive damage in a tight area, where Special Delivery, the stagger, when you drop stagger, you throw a keg up into the air and 3 seconds later it's going to land. The nicest thing about this is it's going to have the movement speed slow on top of also like other things that are going on with your group. If you have like a Frostmage, for example, they're also being slowed by that. So Special Delivery kind of loses its lust here. I am biased to Rushing Jade Wind because it's been kind of the talent choice for so long for Brewmaster, and the Special Delivery kind of came into the meta recently. If you find yourself kiting frequently, there is a chance that your Special Delivery will miss its target, and that actually happened a few times in this video. So I find that Rushing Jade Wind is a little bit better for those kind of scenarios. And then the other thing with Special Delivery is, if you're not, you want to be purifying as much as possible to get the most damage out of it. Therefore, you want to be lowering your cooldowns as much as possible. And if you're spending more of your energy, and if you're spending more of your rotation on Rushing Jade, or not Rushing Jade Wind, spinning Crane Kick, you're not getting the CDR from Tiger Palm. So that's something you want to keep in mind when you're running Special Delivery, is that you don't need to spend as much time using spinning Crane Kick, which also dumps your energy. We'll talk about that more, I think, in the breakdown. All right, so let's jump in. So for comp, we're seeing something not really standard at all. We have Of course, Jaetriel, you're on your Brewmaster. We have Druid. We have the Desterlock, which is super, super nice to have in almost any key currently. And then you have Marks Hunter and Enhanced Shaman. So you have a very diverse damage profile here within your group. I don't know if this is the comp that you normally run, but it's not a bad comp. The Druid complements the Brewmaster really well with their damage profile. So we're starting off with something that you see often in lower pugs, which is going to be the patrol plus the 2 Darkblades. Some groups pull the center pack with the Obliterator and Darkblade. So this pull I would consider very, very small for the comp you have. You have a Marks Hunter and a Desterlock. If you have those types of classes in your group, you want to pull pretty beefy, some beefier pulls. So you can, if you have them in your route later, it would definitely be worth picking those up now. So the biggest thing that I noticed right off the bat is you have a good UI setup with your cooldowns here right in the center of your screen. But the biggest thing that bothers me the most about your UI, feel free to change this if you like it, this is super clutter. All of this like text of the damage that you're taking, it's good to know, but you can have it more off your screen. It's really hard to even see your character with everything that's going on with the way that your UI is set up. So first pull goes down, you know, you see your 20k DPS, that's good. That means the damage check is probably not going to be too crazy. The triple kick here is scary. I think normally a tank should kick first, unless obviously they're out of range, but the triple kick there was kind of rough. Night Fae Hunter is interesting, but I guess that's not what we're really worried about. One thing that I noticed that you do a lot more than I think I personally do, and I think this comes down to actually reverse talent choice, is you're running special delivery, but you're spending a lot of your energy and your globals on spinning crane kick, or more than you should, and you're not purifying as often as you should as well. So to optimize that talent, you want to spinning crane kick a little less. You still want to spinning crane kick, but you want to do it a little less, because you're going to then be able to purify more often, which throws up more special delivery kegs, which means more damage from that talent choice. I don't see your Black Ox cooldown on your action bars. I think I see it here. I think that's what this icon would be, right? Oh, it's right here. Never mind. You're good. Pretty good job kiting there. So another thing you definitely want to be doing in pulls like this is you want to make sure that you're kicking these wicked bolts, because they do a ton of damage to you. And stagger's a lot less effective. Or alternatively, you can also kick curses, which I think is what ended killing some of your group here. A great thing for that is a set focus macro. A set focus macro allows you to kind of set up before your pull. You can set focus to the target you want to prioritize kicking. And then while you're doing the pull, you can freely target whatever you want. You can tab target all around. You don't really have to pay attention to what you're hitting until you see that cast, and then you can just kick it with that hitting your keybind. You don't have to switch targets or anything, and you can continue on doing your rotation. Chaining here is really good. This is a bursting, a bursting storming week. So chaining like this is always a good solution. Pulling those groundskeepers in right off the rip could make it really deadly. If you had maybe like a holy priest, it would be different, but this is a good chaining opportunity, especially because you're getting extra CDR and funnel damage from some of these classes. And then everything ends up going down at the same exact time. Another thing that would be super, super helpful is a log link. I tried looking up your log, and I couldn't find it, because a log could be very helpful for a lot of reasons. It can help me identify where you're taking the most damage, and it can also identify when you're accurately using cooldowns, or if you're keeping your cooldowns on cooldown. Because if you're not using your cooldowns on cooldown, you're getting less uses of them in a key. Now, of course, you don't always want to be hitting your cooldowns if you're not taking a lot of damage, but you can be getting maybe possible 2 or 3 more fortifying brews throughout your whole run. So this is another standard pull you might see in a lower key. In a higher key, it's with your composition, there's the opportunity to get a lot more damage out here by having these groundskeepers in, by using lust on this pull instead of that other instead of like another pull. Another thing that I think you might not be doing is you have a ton of ability to control these mobs using things like Clash and using things like Ring of Peace. So there are a lot of curses going out, and there are a lot of bolts, which are what is causing your group to perish like this. And you can simply, when all three of them are casting, you can Ring of Peace at the edge of the character models to bump them slightly into one direction while still keeping them stacked. You obviously have Leg Sweep, which you did use there, and then you can also roll away and clash a target to interrupt them, as long as they're not rooted or already stunned. If they're freely casting and they're not hindered at all, you can just absolutely control mobs, which is something you want to try to do a little bit more in these higher keys, because again, one bolt could end your life in any higher key than this. Brewmaster, not so much, but there are other tanks too that can get absolutely fucking steamrolled by these wicked bolts. So Groundskeeper's chaining into this isn't a bad thing. It's just an odd pull with the count. So now you're going to be doing 2-target cleave, which I think, if I'm not mistaken, marksmen are okay with now. Correct me if you're a marksman main and you're watching this video, but 2-target cleave is typically frowned upon. It's either you want single target, or because it determines a rotation. So single target, most DPS classes know what their single target rotation is, and in AoE, most classes know what their AoE rotation is. But 2-target cleave, it's very hard to optimize because you don't know if the AoE is actually going to be beneficial, because you might be doing significantly less damage to 2 targets instead of focusing on one, and then they're dying at different times. It's just kind of odd. So one thing here you can do. So it looks like you had a little bit of trouble. It's kind of hard. I should have downloaded this maybe. Been easier to skip around instead of using the YouTube bar. So when you tried to pull this obliterator, you pulled by proximity. If you taunt it first, or if you hit it first with an ability, it'll actually run out to you a little bit. So you aggroed the Darkblade, so the obliterator stood still, which meant you grabbed Stoneborn. I'm assuming you have a Venthyr, which is fine. But if you do that, you might want to set up your Stoneborn first before kind of going in, because there's a lot of risk of pulling it all together. The Stonebreath might come out off right away and kill someone. Also, Darkblade frontals are real scary for whoever's coming in to try to control the Stoneborn. You have a pretty big range on the Stoneborn control, but it's nothing... it's still scary to be kind of near that Darkblade. Hunter had a good frozen trap there. These mobs did get stacked up real nicely, and then the big thing you want to watch out for are these. You don't want your stacks to get too high. Luckily, you're Dwarf, so you have Stone Form available, and you have Kyrian File, since you're Kyrian. So far throughout here, you've been doing a pretty good job at keeping your Breath of Fire on cooldown. With the tier set, Brewmasters really want to prioritize that. On top of that, it also gives you really big expel harm damage because it's going to generate you those orbs. But on the counter to that, something that I don't think you're doing a great job of is purifying as often as you should. There's oftentimes you're kind of sitting on a charge, and while you have either Weapons of Order or Nizao up, or even with Special Deliver, you want to be purifying as often as possible. And that's kind of what I'm trying to make the argument for. So you good ring there to keep them away from you. These Gargants do a ton of melee damage with their jagged bites. And then obviously the bleed also hurts tanks a lot, especially monks. Dots are not fun on a monk because it kind of double dips with that stagger effect. So it looks like here you're setting up to try to get just Groundskeepers with the Relic. This is right before they fix it. I think they fix it, and now this Obliterator here is linked, which is the biggest pain. So right here, like, you're seeing this constantly kind of light up, and when it lights up, it seems like you have 2 stacks. I might be interpreting that wrong. I'm trying to look at your action bar. It looks like you have 1 still. But again, you kind of always want to be purifying, and because of that, when you're constantly purifying, you're always going to have that huge 10 stack of Celestial Brew, and that 10 stack is a massive, like, 60 to 80k absorb, depending on like your agility and other kind of multipliers. Is this a weak aura you have? This is kind of interesting. Is this showing what kind of damage you're taking? Because if it is, this is really interesting, because you can see that you're taking for a bit, you were taking a fair bit of shadow damage, and it's mainly because you have this thing here, right? You're not kicking. Kicking is definitely a huge thing that you can do, and you have Ring of Peace on cooldown, but again, you have a lot of power in your toolkit to knock mobs, to kind of reposition mobs, and those repositioning of mobs also interrupts casts. Kicking is always going to be the priority, so having like a kick rotation in your group, making sure that you have first kick, this person has second kick, or if you're in Discord, you know, vocalizing that. But if there are no kicks up, or you notice that no one's kicking, using those types of abilities are really, really beneficial. Good mount, by the way. This is a good mount. Big fan of the Wandering Ancient. So you're at 66.67. One thing you can do here, so same thing, is when you're running in, if you come kind of off to this left-hand side and you taunt the Obliterator, it'll run a little bit to the left or towards you before it casts, which puts it in a better position to stack it, as well as it moves it away from this little Stoneborn. I'm going to assume you're going to grab this later, but stacking these mobs up is really important. Because they're spread like this, that's not great. You want things to be stacked, especially with a comp like this. In-hand shamans really want a nice stacked group because most of their AoE damage is cone. I might be wrong about that. It used to work like that with like Crash Lightning and stuff. Everything was cone based. I don't think they changed it. I know that they run more of like don't they run like a Flame Shock build now? Don't they like really try to prioritize like having hots and stuff? But things like Crash Lightning and their frontal cleaves are typically actually cones, where a lot of other melee DPS, it's like AoE around them. Like Spinning Crane Kick, Blade Dance. Those are types of abilities where they can kind of AoE in a general area and it does damage. Enhancement Shamans really need stuff to be stacked. It's also just a good practice for you as well to maximize your damage. The tighter things are stacked, like these special deliveries aren't going to be hitting this Houndsmaster now. Luckily, the Houndsmasters leap in, so you got pretty nice there. They stacked up nice and neat. I see someone talking about getting second Gargan. I'm assuming you're going to double it. There is a way to get 3 gargoyles here for boss. It doesn't matter as much because this is a fort week. It's a 21. The boss should fall over pretty quickly with double. You got 72.53, so you need to be going up at, it's like 78.5 roughly, if you're not skipping anything. If you're skipping stuff, you'll need a little bit more. So you should be fine probably to, I'm assuming you're going to woe skip after this. While your group is stacked. This first positioning, you definitely want to make sure your shaman was on top of you. There is a really good tactic to stacking and making this as clean as possible and using as little space as possible. Right now you're doing a good job by standing in the shard. If you're not scared about how much damage you're taking, standing in the shard is not a bad thing. This is a fine stack. This is a good range bait, so you guys are doing pretty good so far on this. You move in just at the last second. Perfect. You roll out. You want to be careful of that patrol, though. You guys are looking fine, though. That Shadowgrass Totem is working. Okay, so you guys ended up getting the patrol. So one note that I have for this boss already is when you are pulling this, I would pull the boss towards the side you've cleared. So you've cleared a lot of the trash that's up in this right, towards the south side of the dungeon. I would try pulling the boss that way because I don't know if this is intentional to pull this in or not. It might have been. Based on your percentage, I'm assuming it wasn't. And based on the reaction of the way your group positioned, I'm sure it wasn't. And based on the fact that it wasn't on the pull where you lusted, it probably wasn't intended. So you just want to be careful of that. It looks like you guys will probably be fine. I'm imagining you'll be fine. That rapid fire needs to be interrupted. It could be interrupted with paralysis. Another great interrupt as well. A pseudo interrupt is just a quickly paralysis. Looks like it's your shift 1 button. Keeping everything under the bosses, though, is exactly what you want to do. That Ring of Peace to knock them away from you on the Loyal Beast cast was good. Still managing to keep these next to each other, which is impressive. And now you do have room over here since you ended up pulling this pack. Shaman got clipped there. He has Onky Onks. Still have your 2 battle reses, and then you want to watch out for this. There's a little bit of time that you have. As soon as the beams come out, they're not active yet. So you have a time to see which way they're rotating and sidestep. Be very careful here with Storming. Storming knocked you in a good direction. That's good. You're right inside of this. It should be a debris next. Perfect. And the boss goes down. Really easy. That was a mistake that was cleaned up pretty well. You're at 78, so you guys are already technically good to go, but you need woe. One thing I would do here is I would tag the Obliterator and then roll backwards because this is kind of a tight encounter space, but again, I normally don't pull that patrol. So now that the patrol's gone, you have a little bit more room to work with. Good interrupt on the Ring of Peace. And then all 3 of you kicked the Obliterator, and now only 1 kick is available for the burst. The burst goes off here and kills the Lock, who had kick available. He's saying that's unfair. Oh, man. The irony. He was the person who could have stopped that. That's amazing. Keeping these things stacked is really good. You actually want to be prioritizing the other two mobs and keeping a 1-kick rotation on the Obliterator, or the Drifter, sorry. Drifter has a 15-second internal cooldown, so you can assign 1 melee kick, or like Shaman, to just always kick the burst. And that should always cover it, and then everyone else can kick the Wicked Bolts and the Curses. Since the patrol was killed, you don't need to worry about the concealment. Looks like you guys still might run around. Nope, you're fine. The lock said wait till bursting is gone in the text chat. I just realized that you guys actually can't see that now. It's not true. You actually, bursting will not break your concealment. They changed that. It used to, on like the first week it did, but now it doesn't. They fixed it. So you can set up just very small min-maxing. You can set up a Transcendence in the middle while you're running up to the door, and then as soon as he knocks you back, you can transcend right to the middle. This prevents melee from accidentally getting hit right on pole. I've seen in like 25s and 26s, I've seen melee just get hit backhanded by Echelon and just killed instantly. Good dodge on the You could pretty easily ring this guy in. You want to try to get these as stacked as possible. Sometimes they stack up really nice and neat. Sometimes they kind of come in to about in a 10-yard radius. You want to try to kick one, ring one in, and then they should stack pretty nicely after that. The biggest thing is just kicks. This range should be fine though. So again, another thing, if you ever see this light up, you're not hitting Purifying Brew enough. You don't want 2 charges while you're in combat. You want to purify constantly. You have your special delivery that's needing to do damage. And again, like if you're dropping stacker with Nai Zhao, who's I think currently active, you want to be optimizing that damage all the time. So good. This far one can be ringed in. I'm like waiting for the clutch ring. You can also clash it in, but clashing is a little weird here because if you run out to the left and then try to clash him, it'll root all the other ones. So if anyone else is trying to knock them in or anything, it's pretty rough. If this healer is a friend of yours, you can also try to set up a nice little wombo combo with Ursul's Vortex in ring, or if he's running Balance Affinity, he can always Typhoon. I can't tell if he looks like he's kitty weaving, so I doubt he's running. Yeah, he doesn't have Typhoon. You can set up a little combo where you Ursul's Vortex and you can ring them into one direction and they all get sucked up and they get nice and stacked. You can also, if you know like a hunter, they can Explosive Shot. There's ways to get that knockback. These ads are bugged. You should have asked him to play you a song there. One thing you kind of want to do or keep in mind for this fight is when ads do start to die, you want to pull Echelon away from the ads a little bit, because when the curse comes out and there's melee and you don't have a ton of curses spells in this group, I mean you have 2, which is actually more than the standard, but it allows you to, I'm blanking out. It allows your melee to kind of be in a safe spot and melee to kind of maximize their damage on the boss before they're inevitably stunned by the Curse of Stone. Good pull, good Transcendence out. You got a nice threat built already, and then you guys are probably targeting here, or Relic, yeah. This is a really scary pull on Fort Week. A lot of groups have to commit pretty heavy cooldowns here. What my group's actually been doing is we've been skipping this pull. There is a way to do it by death skipping. The tank needs to die. None of the rest of the group dies. So it takes 5 seconds, 10 seconds for 5 seconds, 10 seconds to get there. 5 second on the timer to die, and then obviously like the 10-second res roughly. But skipping triple Gargan on Fort Week, especially when you're missing the Loyal Beast casts, is definitely worth. It could kill a lot of time. If you are at this point at 11 minutes, it's typically looking pretty good unless you're gonna wipe anywhere. So just kind of like the expectation for a hauls is like you want to finish Echelon around, like if you're finishing at like 12 minutes, you're good. If you're finishing with like 10 minutes, it's okay. You got a little text in chat saying pull next pack without relics. It's very easy to do. All you have to do is taunt or tag one of these frontal dark blades, and then the rest of the guys come running because they're LOS. If you stay in the room and they start casting, as soon as you kick one of them, they'll come, the relics. So just be careful. Wow, that is a horrible angle to be at. I love this POV. The tank POV is always the best POV. You're doing a very good job here at not moving too much, which is probably sounds like sarcasm, but it's not. Again, you want that stacked damage. They're all stacked. There's no reason to kite them unless you're feeling like you're in danger or you just kind of need to create some space. Collections got off a little bit here. You had a good ring to create a gap between you and the range, or the mobs in the range group, keeping everything nice and stacked. Again, your group needs to make sure that they're kicking these bolts. They're lucky you're a Brewmaster, essentially, is what I'm trying to get at. My Guardian would have fallen over if we let a bolt go through. So then this is one of the very few pulls where you can kill Vi. I recommend pulling these back. This is a really scary spot to be between these two Stoneborns. Looks like you guys are tagging them already. Are you pulling? I think you're going to pull Vi up into a room, which is fine. If you LOS Vi, he'll port up into the room. Normally Vi is really obnoxious because he kind of stays in range. But this room is very small, so it's very easy to get cleave onto him. You should be going for here. If you're really feeling ballsy, you'll touch of death it. And you did. And that gets an instant You want to make sure you taunt that before it claps your hunter. And again, this is where a set focus comes in handy. You can set focus to this big old boss lady. And then, oh, you gotta get that ghost out of here. If you set focus her, you can target whatever you want and not feel like you're gonna lose threat because you're still able to kick her. Again, on Fort Weeks, this isn't as important because it's Fort Week, right? This boss was buffed recently, so now you need to be a little bit more careful on Tyrannical Weeks, but it's not anything crazy. The boss is still just as easy as long as you're getting your 3 kicks. You're good. Typically, you can go melee, melee, range kick, and then you just keep doing that rotation. You'll have it. It's about 25 seconds between the 3rd kick of each set, so pretty standard. Little tip: you can provoke the ghost to make it run faster to get to the lantern quicker, so your DPS have less downtime. It sometimes will be bad though if your DPS aren't ready for it or are in position, because you'll provoke it, it'll get to them, it'll melee them and kill them, which is always fun. I love doing that in lower keys. But if you see like your range is running out or something, you can just provoke it and it'll get to the urn faster. Once again, it's really hard to see your single target rotation here because you don't have like a GCD tracker. I'll show you what that is in a couple minutes. Once the key's done, I'll quickly log in and I'll show you exactly how to set that up. It looks like you're using details with an LVUI template. So I see a lot of groups do this and they pull back and they just like overcommit cooldowns to the back of the room. Something you can do is split up your group into different quadrants, or you want to make sure that your DPS with cleave are all going to the front. Is Cigar in here? Yeah, so you guys did get a kick on Cigar. That's the other problem that I've seen, is that Cigar sometimes will run to the middle of the room and then no one kicks him, which is a big problem. The only time you do this strat in the back is on Explosive Week. That's the only time you do this strat. Now again, this is, I guess it's more subjective. My group likes to spread out, especially when you have like classes that can do a ton of AoE damage. Like my Venthyr Bear can basically solo the front of the room. Different tanks have to do different things in this room. And different DPS comps, but your Marks Hunter, or your Marks Hunter can pretty much solo the back of the room. Or at least one of the sides. Wherever he puts his Wild Spirits, that stuff is dead. Healer goes down here. Do you get a battle res? The lock is taking heavy fire from the fixates. The lock goes down. Jaetriel going for the solo. Just got to make sure that hunter isn't fixated at any point. You definitely want to make sure you're kicking Inquisitor Cigar. Another reason that a set focus macro is super important. You can set focus to him on basically as soon as you pull this room. And then like if you ever need to kick, you can roll back to him, kick him. You can Transcendence back to where you were. It'll also bring Cigar in. You obviously want to like taunt and provoke him. Great Ring of Peace on your hunter to keep him safe. You guys need a little bit more damage to get some of these guys down. He still has 2 fixates on him. They're fading here. Hunter is safe. This is a messy room, man. So he has another fixate. He has 2 fixates. 1 dies. You're safe. He can easily... He should have Binding Shot back up soon. Yeah, then this is when you want to keep Cigar on top of these envies. You want to try to chase him around. You have kick in a second. Yeah. This room can get really messy really quick. And your guy's released. How are you guys going to get back here? Do you invis pot? I guess healer can go back and res. I'm trying to think about how they're going to get back here. All right, we'll skip through this. Cigars, this is just going to be, you're going to have to muscle through this guy. Lock got back somehow. I don't know how. I'm assuming invis. You guys will summon him? You guys have 4 minutes. This is going to be a little bit of a tight key if you have to summon a lock too, or summon the shaman. Summoning stone going down here. Oh. Shaman somehow made it without summon? Alright, this is it. This is the, as long as you have no deaths, 330 is like a fine kill time on a fortified 21. Gotta watch those statues though. Hunter's getting hit by statues. That's actually like right on par. That's incredible. The Stigma of Pride debuff, this big dot that you have a weak aura for, it's really scary. Watch the Force Slam, you got hit by it. Statue coming in. You're lucky that statue wasn't aimed at you. That would have been so funny. You guys love getting hit by rocks. Holy shit. So you should be double soaking this side. You're in a good position for it. Right underneath that boss on these lines intersect. Where these lines basically intersect is where you need to be standing on. Like right underneath this hitbox, a little bit skewed off to one side. Watch out for the storming. If you're double soaking, your group needs to prioritize soaking the storming for you so you don't get displaced. That massive chain harvest, let's go. Oh, you guys are annihilating this boss. He's almost Door of Shadowing again after this Erupting Torment. He's at 40% right here. Door of Shadows. So same thing's going to happen. You want to make sure you're out. You can always set up a Transcendence inside of his hitbox. If you really want to like min-max, you want to soak that storming first. We'll say that was on purpose. And then a nice little double soak here. You're missing one. Your Warlock should be soaking, not your Hunter. That's a yikes. That's okay though. Spinning Crane Kick. Okay. This boss execution is like expected. Like you really, in higher keys, especially on Tyrannical weeks, you need to be careful of these statues. Both you and whoever else. The 24 or 25 I did the other day, statues were just one-shotting. Yeah. So you guys finished this 11 deaths. Oh man. You guys have so much room for improvement here. In this key, and like looking at the timer and the deaths, if this group was to run again, there's a lot of things you can clean up. There's some pulls you can clean up for percent. Oh, I love these like random is that Bruno Mars? Uptown Funk. Holy shit. So a couple things. We'll back this up to just some random point. I'll pause. Nice big old 2.4K. So just a couple things that I would want to highlight is the talent choice you're taking for special delivery. Purify and cooldown. Make sure you're doing that and keeping brew on cooldown. That's really, really big. You can get a lot more disruption with the Ring of Peace knocks and clashes, as well as paralyses. Paralysi? Something like that. Spinning Crane Kick is a damage increase. It is more damage than Tiger Palm, and it's like roughly the same energy, especially once you're kind of getting into the higher tolerance of your haste buff from your stagger. But with special delivery, you're going to be losing damage because you're not going to be able to purify as often, and you're already not purifying as often as you should be. So you have a lot of room to grow when it comes to your kind of defensive palette. Cooldown management seemed pretty fine. I couldn't see anything out of the ordinary, and again, without a rotation tracker, I can't see exactly what you're doing right and wrong. Blackout Kick probably needs to be used a little bit more often. That's a kind of a thing that I noticed when I was first watching through after the first couple pulls, is Blackout Kick is very strong for both single target threat as well as giving you 3 seconds of shuffle. Spinning Crane Kick kind of extends your shuffle. Keg Smash obviously gives you good shuffle, and once you're in a pull, you're going to be pretty stable. But like this number here, this 7 seconds, this could be upwards of 15-20 seconds. You can have really high shuffle, which is going to be your kind of basic mitigation. So Blackout Kick, you kind of want to hit it on cooldown if it's like a 2 to 3 targets. In AoE, you can get away with not hitting it, but again, it hits pretty hard. It'll crit for like 5 or 6k. Some of your pulls were a little sketchy, or not sketchy, sus. Like this first pull, you can pull so much bigger. If you guys are trying to get to a shard quickly to get lust, I recommend going left first. Something that you might see people do is you'll CC this patrol, you would CC the Hound's Master, and then you can take these Dark Blades to the first shard, and you can get a fucking huge lust there, which is just going to be obviously massive because you have 2 Dark Blades, 2 Obliterators, a Collector, a Shard, and you can get 4 Groundskeepers. You'll have 10 targets, which is just going to be massive. You can get obviously like a bunch of damage out. The only thing you'd want to be careful for is like 10 stack bursting on this week specifically. So there's a little bit of route optimization. For the most part though, pretty standard route. A little bit later in the dungeon, let's go try. It's so hard to skip her. I don't know why I decided to do this. I should have downloaded the video. I'll do that next time. So there is a group. See if I'll pause it here. There is a group at the bottom of the stairs here. If you pull these in your route somehow, you'd have to skip something else. You can actually get a 3rd gargoyle for the first boss. Really good tip on Tyrannical Week. Outside of that, most of your routing seemed pretty fine. It was just standard. You kind of need a like a push group to start doing some unique routes where you're like skipping stuff and CCing Hounds Masters. Obviously, this was a pretty big mistake too, pulling this group. And then obviously, I'm gonna type up some notes as well, and I'll send them to you, Jaetriel. So again, thank you so much for sending this to me. It was a lot of fun to kind of go over the footage and see what you're doing right and wrong. I like judging people, so I hope you learned something. This isn't supposed to be instructive, I guess. Hopefully you found it was informational. Let's quickly jump over to my account so I can show you exactly how to set up your the plugin for your GCD tracker. All right, so here we are. Let's log in really quick and I'll show you. So this is in details. There might be weak words and stuff out there, other add-ons that do this. I don't know any of them. Off the top of my head, at least, I could probably figure something out, but details is a really cool plugin feature that you can get. I think it actually just comes with details. I don't think you need to like download anything extra. Oh god, I was playing Windwalker. Hold on, let me switch specs. All right, so let's see. We have details down here. So what we do is we go to settings, and then you go down here to broadcaster tools. I don't know if you guys can see that. It's kind of small. So broadcaster tools, and then you go to action tracker. This should be here. You shouldn't need to like download anything else. And then you can open this up. It'll give you your options. And that's what this little box in the corner is. And this provides me with this type of information here. We'll close this. So if I spinning crane kick, it's going to say spinning crane kick. If I rushing Jade Wind, it's going to say rushing Jade Wind. If I breath of fire, it'll say breath of fire. So what this does is it allows you to look back at your own footage and see, but it allows someone like me to be like, okay, here. Okay, this is where you messed up in your rotation. You should have used maybe this spell instead. Now, obviously, there's like fluctuation, like when you're using defensives or when you need to like, you know, kite rolling versus like just doing another spinning crane kick or something like that. Like there's a lot of different things that can be taken as interpretation. But what's really nice about this is that you can look back and be like, okay, I didn't use that here and I should have, or I was sitting on this cooldown too long, whatever it might be. What's also nice about this is if you really want to, it's more of a preference. In here you can use square mode, which is this. So square mode, it'll show these. You might see this on like a lot of times the guys on the like Race to World First. I remember watching JPC on team Liquid has that tracker. So you'll see like the action tracker here. So spinning crane kick. You'll see Chi Wave, spinning crane kick, rushing Jade Wind, breath of fire. So if you prefer the square mode, you can do that instead. But there's a ton of, you can really customize it. I just like the standard in it. Just, it'll show you also who you're targeting. So Chi Wave at Fiona. So yeah, Chi Wave at Barola. So it lets you see like, oh, I went to go dispel this person and it went on me instead. So that's where like I messed up. So a lot of cool options with that. If you have details, great plugin to have. All right, so anyways, I hope you enjoyed the kind of the analysis breakdown of your run. I might have missed stuff. I'm not perfect, but I hope it was informational and you learned something. So thanks for watching.